my typical day.
This is exactly, I think, why it is interesting to be ambassador. Because you don't, in a small embassy, have a typical day. You can plan, and people do that, I also do, and I tell myself, tomorrow I will be sitting behind closed doors, and I will be writing a report about the Latvian and Russian relations, and it will be very good and concentrated, and I will deliver it at 4 o'clock to the ministry. And if you are in a small embassy, what happens at 9:50 or even earlier is that somebody turns up and says, well, I'm a Danish businessman and I have a problem with these stupid I'm in Latvia. With these stupid people here, and you have to help me. And you may have a trade advisor, but no. He wants the ambassador to do it because this is very important, because it is his money. And then you start doing that, and then maybe 2 hours later you come back from a meeting with somebody in the ministry and you say, well, there was this report, maybe I will have to begin it today and finish it tomorrow. And then you have, that happens also, a drunken Dane coming in and his passport has disappeared. And you may have a consular officer, but again, I'm a very important Dane, by the way, and I want to speak to the ambassador, and I mean, I can have a new passport, but I definitely don't want to pay for it, because it was not my fault. I was drunk, that's right, but somebody stole it, and so on. And that is actually, when you look at the end of such a week, you say to yourself, well, I should have been writing a report about the relationship between Russia and Latvia. I may do it next week, but what you do, which you don't think you do, is that you learn much more about the country you're living in than by closing the door and sitting and writing.
Okay, well, thank you, and I agree with my colleague that there really is no typical day in an ambassador's life, but I try to put some order into the chaos by having a few fixed points through my day to help me organize the work. And two other things about being an ambassador. One is it's a 24/7 job. You're on duty, you're working 24 hours a day. You're never off duty if you're in the country you're serving in, or in the country in which you're representing your country. And secondly, it's a very public job. Almost any time you go out, you'll have some interaction with the public. It'll be something organized like this, or you simply meet people on the street who know you're the ambassador. So you have to always keep in mind, it's a public job and it's a 24/7 job. So I go to work out at 7 a.m. because it's the only time in my day that I can get exercise. And if I don't exercise, I can't keep up the pace of activities. So 7 a.m. exercise. And then I go to the embassy and I gather my team. And American embassies, we have the luxury of having a large staff, and we have several sections in the embassy. We have a political section that does work on the political issues, security issues. We have a military section that works on the defense issues, economic section, public affairs section that organizes events like this. Nick, stand up. This is my public affairs, cultural affairs officer. And he does a great job, by the way. We have a management section that handles all of the issues of supporting an embassy overseas, and we have a consular section. I bring together my core team, and we spend 15 to 20 minutes every day at 9 o'clock going over all of the things we're working on, what things are likely to come up and surprise us, so that we're prepared. And after that, I do language lesson. It's in my schedule every day. I can't always make it, but I try to do at least 45 minutes a day at 10 o'clock with a teacher from the Pedagogical University, formerly the Pedagogical University. And then we do emails. Ambassadors these days are overwhelmed with information. I don't know if that's true for you, but I have a classified email system. I have an unclassified email system. We still have faxes and we have Blackberries. We get cables from Washington, so there's a plethora of information coming at us. We also have to read press clips to know what's going on in the country. So I spend a little time, as much time as I can, going through all of this information. And then we go into meetings. I meet frequently with colleagues in the Lithuanian government, other diplomatic colleagues, institutions in Lithuania, civil society. US diplomats are expected to be diplomats not just to the government of the country they live in, but also to the people. And we're encouraged to engage and work with students and others in the private sector, business people. We'll often have representational lunches. I'll have a lunch at my residence, and I'll invite a group of businessmen who are interested in a project here. I'll invite officials who want to talk to me about Lithuania's energy policy or your views on missile defense. And between those kinds of interactions and meetings with people, the day gets eaten up. Of course, Washington wakes up at about 2 in the afternoon, Lithuanian time, and then the workflow doubles because we have phone calls from Washington, raising problems, asking questions, and we have to respond quickly, by email or by phone. As you go through the day, you're looking to the evening. And almost every evening, I'm sure my ambassador colleagues will agree, there are interesting events to do in Lithuania. Official events, receptions, dinners, cultural events. So we're out very often, almost every night, almost every evening. So it's a physically demanding job. That's why I put emphasis on staying fit. And then we go home, and I usually get a phone call from Washington because it's getting towards the end of the day and they want answers on whatever the issues were they had asked us to work on. And that's sort of a normal day, but you can always have something that comes in from outside to disrupt it all. But that's sort of the basic framework.
Well, thank you, and I have to say again that I agree with you both. One of the beauties of this work is that you never really know what will happen during a day, but at the same time, of course, you need to organize your work so that you can focus on the most important things. I, of course, also have a daily schedule, a little bit similar, although not with the 7 o'clock exercise. I'm sure I should do it. I do it at a time sometimes, but apart from that, I spend my mornings getting my children prepared to send them off to school, and once I have done that, I start always the first hour in the morning from 8:30, going through all the incoming information, through emails, through cables, reviewing the press that I can review in English. Every morning we also have our press review of all the Lithuanian press, with where I gather all my staff, all the staff sent out from Stockholm to join with our press office to go through the papers, so that we are as well updated as we can on what is happening in this country, because that is, of course, the basis for everything that we do here. We need to have as good a grip as possible on developments in Lithuania. For the rest, what Anne is describing is very similar to what I will do, with the difference that Sweden does not have as big an embassy, of course, as the United States anywhere in the world, but this is perhaps a mid-size embassy by Swedish standards. I try to divide my work to give sort of a balanced attention both to internal type of work, which is both management administration. It's very important to keep your budgets in line, to implement the projects that you want to implement, to ensure that staff guidance is provided in a proper manner on analytical work, but then also on the external work, which is so extremely important and which I think is getting even more important as sort of the diplomacy and the role of diplomats has been evolving over the past decades that we have been discussing here. So that entails both representing Sweden, of course, but also participating in countering people, acquiring, obtaining information, improving all the time, hopefully, my own understanding of this country, but at the same time conveying messages, ideas, values from Sweden. So that is the kind of balance. That being said, again, anything can happen, and that is not only in an ambassador's life, but also in any kind of diplomats on any level. I can just tell you one true day that I once had in Tokyo when I tried to write down. This is one that I remember when I was in the midst of a banking crisis in Tokyo, where I had a very pressing task because there was a strong interest in Tokyo to look into how Sweden had solved its banking situation in the early 90s. So I was pressed by Stockholm and by my colleagues in Tokyo to write reports, to obtain information. I had set up a number of meetings. I was on my way to go off to have a meeting with some kind of financial analyst, when they called and said, well, there is just a Swede who has been arrested for drugs-related crime. So I had to go immediately to the prison instead and see this inmate, which took me an hour. So then I wanted to go to see this financial analyst, but then somebody called and said, well, our number 2 DCM has just fallen sick, and he needs somebody who can actually marry a couple. So I had to rush back to the embassy where I actually did marry a couple. I think that they are still married actually, so I felt that was my first experience in that regard, and it went quite successfully at a nice ceremony with flowers and champagne, and I went back again to try to continue on my financial business, but then they called and it was a football game between Sweden and Japan, and it was supposed to be in the presence of the Emperor and the Empress, and they wanted to have somebody to sing the Swedish national anthems, and they had hired the most famous opera singer of Japan, but of course couldn't speak Swedish, and they knew I was a singer. So could I please come and train the most famous opera singer in Japan, which I of course did, and I actually told him that I'm so busy with my financial report, but could he please come to the embassy? So he came with his manager and his white scarf and his gloves, and we started them practicing the Swedish national anthem for an hour or so, and eventually it was quite good. They have difficulties pronouncing R, so it was a little bit challenging, but it worked well. I went to the game and he did quite well. But then in the end at night I finalized my report, but it was a rather late evening, and this is what it can look like really.
Thank you. I will not repeat what was said already, so I'll give just a simple example. When I usually come home in the evening, my 10-year-old daughter asks the question, "How was your day, Daddy?" I answer, "Okay." And then the second question, actually you've been doing the whole day? And then I'm totally lost. And I always recall the favorite joke of our chief accountant of our ministry, who was kind of reading the reports of our embassies, and then he was also kind of mentioning this ambassador and Mr. X met and discussed. Susitiko ir aptarė. This phrase was kind of repeated almost in all reports. And so this is the feeling that you do so many different things, but at the end you try to remember what actually was happening. And sometimes it's quite difficult. You cover kind of huge surface, but not in depth, and you run and do different things. So this is actually the job of the diplomat, of the ambassador, especially of the small country. And sometimes when I'm asked what's going on, what's Lithuania all about, Lithuanian politics, Lithuanian diplomacy, I use the word fluxus, the thing invented by famous Lithuanian George Mašiūnas in America, when he mixed up everything possible. So probably this is one of the only explanation of what's going on in Lithuania and with Lithuanian diplomacy, and probably with every diplomacy of a small country, and country that has so kind of crazy diplomacy, rushing from one chairmanship to another, trying to achieve everything possible, and then if you think about the planning, so probably comparing my life abroad and life here in Vilnius, it's still possible to plan something abroad, being an ambassador. But here in Lithuania, there is sometimes a feeling that some institutions, like the President's office, the government, and especially the parliament, are somehow constructed to blow up your timetable and to make different things impossible. So then I simply kind of remembering Per Carlsen, who is a fan of Lithuanian jazz, I just consider that everything is jazz. You have just to follow the main tune, and somehow everything organizes in your timetable and in your life.
Well, actually quite a lot has been told about reporting and the importance of reporting. And I recall a story, a 200 years old story about an ambassador who from the United States was sent to Europe and from whom they didn't hear for a year, and said that if for another year they do not hear from him, they will have to call him back. Yesterday we had a different situation, very unexpectedly, North Atlantic Council at ambassador's level, due to very smart management of Secretary General, passed a decision on the air police mission, you know, the issue very important for us. And basically, that was something that we were aiming for, that we were striving for already for a number of years. Basically, the decision was to extend, not to have any time limit for the operation of the air police mission, but just to have regular review of this air police. And well, the problem was that we did not expect to have that decision yesterday.
You're telling me.
And we anticipated that our good friends from certain European nations will have certain questions, and that we will have to discuss, to answer, to prepare better, to report, to have our ambassador in NATO reporting back, asking our government to commit to something else. And in the morning, I did not inform my boss, the president, that decision is looming. And then we've got the decision. And the decision was reported by BNS, but not by me, not by our ambassador. And still I have a big problem.
But you are still an advisor.
As far as he knows.
Ambassador reported 1 hour and a half after the decision was passed, because he could not do that earlier, because all the mobile phones, all the BlackBerries are taken away, and they have no right to have BlackBerries in the sitting room where the council is meeting. So he could not report immediately from the action. I mean, from the spot of the action. But we have also timing these days matters a lot, and ambassador really bears big responsibility on a number of the situations. But actually, I also on an ambassador's day, and just if I may, another 2 minutes. Well, I recall we had I had to, with my colleagues, to establish embassy in Budapest, Lithuanian embassy in Budapest, and we found a nice villa, and we made a contract. We concluded a contract. We rented. We were getting ready for a minister's visit, for opening ceremony some time later, and suddenly, well, I get a message that well, the minister needs to come earlier, and you need to arrange a visit earlier. And well, our good friends Hungarians appear to be very flexible, and they arranged the date very close. And I found that I have a week to prepare the building for opening, official opening. And well, it was early March. That winter was quite cold. On the slopes of Buda in Budapest, there was still a lot of ice and snow. And the trails and the paths around this nice villa that we rented for embassy premises were not clean throughout the winter. So there was very thick layer of ice all along on all the paths. And then I was a bit disappointed about the service sector in Budapest, as long as I applied to maybe 4 or 5 companies, and all of them refused to clean those paths and trails in 3 days. And said, no, wait for 2 weeks. At the end of March, there will be plus 20, and you will have no worry. But I needed to have it in a few days. So what I did, well, the last resort was to apply to the very nice, small Lithuanian community in Budapest. There's about 20 people, I mean, Lithuanians, who stay there. And we, well, actually I applied to them and I said, could you help me? And because no company is agreeing for any compensation, for any payment to clean those trails. And so what we did, we arranged a cleaning session, a snow cleaning, an ice cleaning session on Saturday. Those who still know Soviet era and the term subotnik, those perhaps people don't know that. But we arranged such kind of, well, assistance session at our embassy premises. No, and you know, ladies were cleaning windows, men were fighting with ice and snow, and we had a few big, heavy metal sticks, and we were cutting that ice bit by bit and trying to win back, I mean, the trails for the embassy. And the local guy one of those the husband to a local Lithuanian who spoke nice Lithuanian said, you know, if ever anyone had told to me that I would be cutting ice with this heavy metal stick together with the Lithuanian ambassador, I would have thought that Russians are back and I'm taken to Gulag.
Yes, so it was interesting to compare the Ambassador's Day and even funny stories, but as you probably got, the Ambassador Derse is paying many times for management. But even Lithuanian ambassadors are supposed to manage their own embassies, despite that they are very small. For some time it was ideal of one of our deputy ministers, not today's deputy minister, to have to cover as much countries as possible, to have just ambassador and dog. It's enough. Most important to have embassy in this country. So, but dog you're supposed to manage too.